Okay, so we're going to take a break from modeling the head just for a moment because we're going to model an eyeball and texture it. There are a lot of tutorials out there and there are some very good ones, and I'm just going to create an eyeball from a combination of what I've seen and what I've done professionally in the past and what works quickly and gives us a great result. So instead of a polygon sphere for an eyeball, I'm going to go into NURBS and I'm going to create a NURBS sphere. And if I was to drag on my grid in my perspective view, the problem is that I want this kind of to map an image of our eyeball, and that this kind of converging vertex at the poles of a sphere, whether it's a polygon or NURBS that's created in our perspective view, force me to rotate it so that it's pointing in the positive Z direction. That's just a step I don't want to take. Just get used to kind of, if you're doing eyes, just to create in your front view. So hold your shift key down and I've created a sphere. I'm going to make sure that I'm at 0, 0, 0 in X, Y, and Z. Control D to duplicate. Now I can just scale that up, and I'm scaling it. I'll go Control A into my channel box just by 1.0, let's just say 1.03. That works for us. For the moment, I'm going to back to select, and I'm going to say modify freeze transformations, and I'm going to call this outer eye. W for my move tool, and I'm just going to move it out of the way for the moment, knowing that to bring it back, just give it a value of 0 and X to bring it to exactly on top of my smaller sphere, which I'm going to call inner eye, which I'll be changing that anyway because we'll be converting these to polygons. I want to go into my perspective view, and I want just to kind of model, you know, we have that concave kind of form in our eye, our actual kind of eyeball for our cornea. Let's model that. I'm going to insert an isoprime to give us a nice edge here. And it takes a little bit, but it's got to drag to get that little isoprime. Select to get out of the tool. Now in my side view, right click, Control Vertex, and I'm just selecting kind of the front vertices here. Use my move tool and just move the selected vertices back to form the kind of concave value for a cornea. Click outside to get rid of that. I'm going to now F8 to object mode, and selecting both, I'll select one and I'll say modify convert NURBS to polygons. I'm going to go to my options box, and our default settings look like this. I don't want triangles, I want to keep everything in quads, and I want to convert according to the control points, and I'll just hit tessellate. Now it's got a copy, so I can move this back in Z just so we can see the difference here. Select that original one. I'll just move it forward. Whoops, because there's a history. Let me just delete by type history. There we go. Now I can move this forward. And actually, I'm going to delete it. Take that back to 0. Now if I hit 3, my soft preview of my eye, and I can go modify, convert smooth mesh preview to polygons, and I'm just going to delete my history one more time. Delete by type history. I've got the great start of my eyeball. This is still a NURBS. Let's convert this, modify, convert NURBS to polys. I've already got the way I want to set up, so I could have just hit convert. Let's delete the history, hit 3, and modify convert smooth mesh preview to polygons, and let's move this. Oops. don't want to delete history because I want to make sure I have my values set here. I could just say -10 just to make sure, and if I do lose it, I know that I need to go +10. Convert NURBS to polygons. Soft preview, hitting the 3 key. Modify, convert, smooth mesh preview to polygons. I'll just go delete by type. History. Move that into +10. Going to select that original NURBS, and this is where I kind of got a little further ahead of myself. This is outer eye, and for the moment I'll just take that back to the side and rename this inner eye. Cool. So let's texture this. Let's add a shader. So I want to add something with specular, so I'm just going to click my rendering tab and I'm just going to add Phong material. And in that Phong material I'm going to add a file. Well, actually, sorry, before I add that file I gotta check my UVs. So under edit UVs we can see what my UVs look like, and they're just by default this big messy group. I'm going to create UVs, and this is not how you would do it if you were doing a character, but because this is just one shader, one texture on an eye, this is a nice fast way. I'm going to do planar mapping. Go to the options box. Default, it's projected from our x-axis. I want to project on the z-axis. So all it's going to do is going to project like a film projector along our positive z-axis. So let's say project. Get this nice kind of projection screen. Now I can go back F8 into my Phong. If I look at my UVs from that, I can see that it's basically kind of collapsed my UVs on top of each other, but this will allow me to use this file and it's just an image I've taken off the web, and of course it's working perfectly because I just need to hit 6 to see it. Now when I hit 6 you can see I get this nice eyeball. It's not quite coming out to the corner of our cornea here, but I can fix that. Just go into my edge mode, double click that edge, and I can scale. Scale this up. You can see it's getting a little diffused, so I can just double click this, scale that down to get a more solid looking pupil, and maybe scale our inner image down. And though this is I'm assuming everyone's familiar with UVs, I'm not going to give a lesson on UV mapping, UV measurements and coordinates, but this is because there's a UV map. Mapping's based on UV coordinates, and which are in U and V directions, and because of that I'm able to adjust my image mapping based on how I move the geometry, because the geometry also has UV coordinates. I'm going to, I think, just delete that edge here. It's looking a little too harsh, so Control Delete. Scale this one back up. And there is a nicely kind of formed mapped eye. Very simple. You can use much higher resolution. I think this is only 512 by 512. Select this outer eye. I'm going to add a new material to this, another Phong. I'll call this outer eye material just so I can stay organized. This time though, I'm going to take that transparency up to 0, because all I want to show for this is that if I just deselect, you can see all I can see is the highlight, and that's all I want to be able to see when we render this. So I'm just going to take this back to 10. So now you can see we get this nice highlight falling on what looks like a round, but we're also getting a reflection within the shape of our cornea. In my outliner window, I'm just going to make sure I select both of these. I'm going to go Group, and I want to make sure that we center the pivot. Actually, before I do that, let's this outer eye, let's just modify freeze transformations. This will zero out our X, Y, and Z. Scales 1, 1, 1. And I'll just make sure the inner eye is the same way it is. Now I can select both, edit, group. You can see I hit center on the pivot. Or now I do, hit center, group. I have group 1, so when I select the outer eye, but I need to select the outer eye. Actually, I just had a change of heart. Let's undo that group and let's just make inner eye a child of outer eye. That way, if I just click on my eye, it's going to select both. Select the inner eye first, shift select the second or whatever is going to be the parent, and hit P. Now when I select it, selects both outer eyes, the parent. I'm going to prepare this to export to my SelfPortrait mesh. I'm going to create a layer here in my channel box. So with that selected, layers, create layer from selected. Call this eye, and just hit save. And I'm going to save my scene as an ASCII file, not a Maya binary. And with the selected, I'm also going to export the selection as an OBJ. Well, we can do FBX as well. Why don't we do FBX? I don't have the plugin turned on right at the moment, so for OBJ, so let's just do FBX. And I'm just going to close this down. Open up my SelfPortrait. I'm going to say File, and I'm just going to import that MA file, I think. Let me see how that works. Either one should work fine for us. Here's my eyeball. You can see I've got a layer here called eye. I'm just going to select it and just call it, resave it as eye. If I hit 6, you can see my texture are to scale enough. I guess just for some reason the center pivot got knocked off here, but that's okay. You can just modify center pivot, scale it down. In my front view, I can move it into place. So it's not too bad, and I can get a sense of how much I'm going to have to move my geometry to match what's going on. Got it perhaps moved a bit. I'm going to leave that. So I'll sculpt this in Mudbox. If that's selected, I'm going to go Control D to duplicate and move this over. Now they are perhaps a bit too far forward, so let's select both. Now I've knocked them off a bit, say 6.6 here. And But I can see where my from my image plane, where my retina is kind of coming there. We're pretty close. I just think I need to scale them up just a bit more. You can see how kind of eerie that gets, but we're pretty close. I'm going to make sure that both eyes are added to this, and to check I can turn visibility on and off. I can rename this eyes, and now I'm just going to lock them, so when I'm modeling I can't touch them unless I want, and I can turn them on and off as I want. So this is looking great. I'm going to just pause there for a moment, because next we're going to look at just checking to make sure everything's ready before we export to Mudbox.